This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, with David Scorpio in the exotic land of Ecuador and Michael Ivey in Asheville, North Carolina. We're here to bring you the news you need to know. We begin today with Mark Meadows, Chief of Staff of Donald Trump, who's been attempting to convince him to concede, acknowledging that Trump has met with several Congress members about the voter fraud, the election theft, and will fight back. Meadows did not elaborate on who the members were. Trump has not conceded the race, has said fraud and irregularities cost him the election, which we have documented here in spades. In recent days, Representative Mo Brooks, Republican of Alabama, and other House members have indicated they would challenge certain states' electoral college votes when they're read during the joint session of Congress on January 6th. Last week, the Republican parties in Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada voted their own slates of electors to preserve Trump's ability to file lawsuits, a significant development. Now, can American citizens actively participate? Very simply, they have to call their congressmen and their senators and demand that they support this effort to protect our election system from fraud and illegal Congress conduct. One member of the Senate and one member of the House are needed to challenge a state's electoral college votes. No one has definitively affirmed it, but Senator-elect Tommy Tuberville, Republican of Alabama, and Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, have both suggested they would do so. Senate Majority Leader, of course, recently characterized Joe Biden as a president-elect and reportedly told senators not to challenge the counting of the electoral vote. But that's irrelevant because it's a matter of election fraud. Very significant. Trump is tweeting, "We have just begun to fight." The Supreme Court had zero interest in the merits of the greatest voter fraud ever perpetrated in the United States of America, alluding to the Texas case. All they were interested in is standing, which makes it very difficult for the president to present a case on the merits of 75 million votes. And of course, Twitter declares this claim about election fraud is disputed, even though it's the report of the President of the United States. Just disgusting what Twitter is doing. Scorpio, your thoughts?
It is amazing that we're seeing, like Twitter and these different media companies actually sort of taking dominance over the president. I mean, they're saying, hey, we determine what's real. We determine what's true. Not, the president is a liar. I'm just amazed by this transformation we're seeing in our society on so many different levels. And, one of the big criticisms I'm hearing about Trump, he's not listening to his advisors about the election. His advisors are trying to tell him to drop out, but he doesn't listen to his advisors. Since when do we elect a president to listen to his advisors? We elect a president to have a leader, supposedly. And they're turning this all on his head. And I just heard just a few minutes ago that Pat Robertson is urging the president to give up his fight and concede the election to Groper Joe Biden. Just amazing.
That is completely disgusting. And what's happening, of course, is that the traitors to the nation are exposing themselves thereby, including even Pat Robertson. Damn him to hell. Michael Ivey, your thoughts?
Building on what Scorpio just started with there, that's kind of where my mind's been going in the last few days, is with this blatant censorship and kind of getting the big picture. You can see that the seat of power is not in the government at all. It's like the controllers of this world have progressively just done an end run around the messiness of representative government. And now it's a corporate oligarchy that's telling the government when they can and can't talk, when what people do. And they've maintained this illusion of the seat of power being in the government, but it's been going on like that for a long time. There was a famous quote from Woodrow Wilson from about 1920 talking about there being a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive that people can't speak about it above their whispers.
Yeah, and we have the famous quote from Voltaire: if you want to know by whom you are controlled, just ask who you cannot criticize.
Can I add a small comment to what Michael just said?
Of course.
Yeah, Michael, that was such a great point you made. You put it into better phraseology than I did. You're so right. And of course, bringing up Woodrow Wilson, his controller was this, Colonel Mendel House, who helped form the CFR and was connected to all these big oligarchs. And that was over 100 years ago, or around 100 years ago. So excellent point. And we're, like you said, it's an in run around representative government. And of course, COVID is the trigger that is releasing all of this oligarchy and technocracy upon the world.
Yeah, they're using the fear of disease to establish a lot of their agenda right now.
Yes, it's completely outrageous. And on a personal note, Princeton, from which I graduated, had the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs, and they're renaming it, which has caused me to sever my ties with the university. This is just disgusting. We might have pros and cons about Woodrow Wilson or Abraham Lincoln or Robert E. Lee, but taking down their statues or smearing them or renaming schools because of this woke movement is a manifest absurdity. I will not stand for it. I have been a steadfast supporter of Princeton since my graduation in 1962. No more. Meanwhile, career intelligence officials' delay of the DNI report on foreign interference is drawing higher. How appropriate. John Ratcliffe, the DNA, was notified by career intelligence officials, no doubt deeply embedded by Barack Obama, John Brennan, and other monsters, other traitors to the United States, that the intelligence community was unable to meet the December 18th deadline, claiming it was due to new information, and a number of agencies have not finished coordinating. This is completely ridiculous. I think that's dishonesty on the part of the bureaucrats, said Bart Marcoy, former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy for Policy and International Affairs. I've never known the IC to say to a president or even a deputy assistant secretary they don't have sufficient information to answer your question. They might say we don't have complete information, but here is our report based on the information we have at this time. The only conclusion you can draw is the IC is purposely stonewalling assessments and reports on foreign interference. This is so it cannot form the basis of an appeal to the Supreme Court, state legislatures, or the Congress to disregard the Electoral College outcome as reported by the disputed states. This is disgusting beyond belief. The dominant theme is the bureaucrats, permanent employees of the government, spent the last 4 years ignoring the authority of the elected president. It's ironic because Biden, in my opinion, is very responsive to the needs, the wishes, and the demands of the Chinese Communist Party. In my opinion, Joe Biden is owned by the Communist Party of China, lock, stock, and barrel. Here's an image of a Chinese paramilitary soldier securing an entry to a hotel in Beijing. The problem is the Trump campaign and his attorneys had only 15 to 20 days to uncover the fraud and manipulation in the election, something the national security apparatus didn't look into over the last 15 to 20 years. Bernstein, a recipient of the Distinguished Intelligence Medal and the Intelligence Star, is best known for having led CIA officers in the seizure of Kabul in Afghanistan, architect of the Battle of Tora Bora. This is a guy whose dedication to the United States is not in doubt. According to Bernstein, a number of foreign countries have been interfering in U.S. elections, including Venezuela, Cuba, China, Russia, and Iran. My opinion is Iran and Russia may have been monitoring, but were not seeking to control the outcome. Former acting director Richard Grinnell told Fox that both the U.S. and international community have failed to recognize China as a clear and present danger. The intelligence is clear. Beijing intends to dominate the U.S. and the rest of the planet economically, militarily, and technologically. Many of China's major public initiatives and prominent companies offer only a layer of camouflage to the activities of the Chinese Communist Party, which, as we reported yesterday, includes ownership of the Dominion machines. Attorney Sidney Powell, who's filed a number of election-related lawsuits in multiple states, said there's already more than enough evidence for Trump to use his 2018 executive order on foreign interference. This is crucial. Given the level of foreign interference we can demonstrate, and the country has evidence in our filings of foreign interference in the election, it's more than sufficient to trigger the president's executive order from 2018 that gives him all kinds of power to do everything from seizing assets to freeze things, demand the impoundment of machines, Powell told the Epoch Times, which, by the way, turns out to be an excellent publication. So an executive order to seize Dominion machines is on the table. Attorney Sidney Powell was spotted Sunday, that's 2 days ago, leaving the White House, where New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman cited a source saying he'd been advocating an executive order allowing voting machines to be collected and examined. Like it. Here's a tweet from Maggie. Confirming what Jay Diamond once saw, Sidney Powell is back at the White House today, once again pitching an executive order on seizing voting machines to examine them for a person with knowledge of the meeting. Unclear if POTUS is planning to go along. So who was her source? Probably Mark Meadows. I wouldn't have a lot of doubt about it. I no longer regard him as trustworthy. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, Jim, you know, I've never seen the oligarchy, the intelligence agencies, and the media so completely unified and aligned against a president ever. This makes what happened to Nixon look like child's play. It's a 24/7 Trump bashing agenda now on every level. And, I totally agree that Joe Biden is closely aligned with China. And so is this whole faction of the deep state that got him into power. They want to bring China into the dominant position of the world. I think that's part of this globalist agenda we're facing. And, this phony hack that Russia supposedly did. First of all, we don't even know if it happened. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I doubt it very seriously. And the whole point is to shift thinking and blame. Oh, look, it's those awful Russians. Don't think about China. Oh, those terrible Russians. They're destroying our democracy. It's just outrageous. And I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
Scorpio, I couldn't agree more. The China thing is clearly just a political distraction, but I think the public's a little sick of it. We've heard too much about Russia over the years. Russia is not the problem. China and Biden and the corrupt intel agency and the mainstream media are the problem. Michael, your thoughts?
I'm starting to be a bit troubled about this delay of the Ratcliffe report. At first, I thought it was just a tactic to let it go at a more propitious time for the Trump administration, but now I'm not so sure. I mean, there are so many of the, what should we call them, rats within the government that have been smoked out by this thing, and we really don't know how deep it goes. And it's reminiscent of, what was the Roman ruler who made that, Marcus Aurelius or something, who made the statement that the state cannot survive traitors from within.
We got a lot of traitors within this government, no doubt about it, Michael.
And
I think
go ahead.
And
we really don't know how far it goes yet. There are so many that we've discovered. Like we only discovered John Roberts really in the last 2 weeks. These people are being controlled by money and blackmail. So over to you.
Well, I think it's sensational that Roberts has been exposed. Very important development. Meanwhile, Trump is headed back to the Supreme Court with a 267-page petition. Before the counting had concluded, Alito had instructed Pennsylvania to segregate late ballots while counting. His wording was important. That by itself was an acknowledgement of a discrepancy between the election rules on the books and the way they were being applied in practice. Precisely that sort of discrepancy is at the heart of Trump's latest court challenge. The constitutional clause laying sole responsibility for election law on state legislatures to the exclusion of any other person, official, or even rival branch of state government, including the secretaries of state and the governors, is what is contested in this state. Changes made to election law in practice were not authorized by the legislature. Therefore, ballots that fail to conform to election law as passed by the state legislatures are by definition invalid. Here's a quick summary. The petition follows a related Pennsylvania case where Justice Alito and 2 others observed the constitutionality of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision extending the statutory deadline for receipt of mail ballots from 8 p.m. on election day to 5 p.m. 3 days later has national importance. And there's a strong likelihood the state Supreme Court decision violates the federal. The Trump campaign continues its explanation of the petition, noting it seeks all appropriate remedies, including vacating the appointment of electors committed to Joseph Biden and allowing the Pennsylvania General Assembly to select their replacements. The campaign's petition seeks to reverse 3 decisions which eviscerated the Pennsylvania legislature's protections against mail ballot fraud, including A, prohibiting election officials checking whether signatures on mail ballots are genuine during canvassing on election day, B, eliminating the right of campaigns to challenge mail ballots during canvassing for forged signatures and other irregularities, C, holding that the rights of campaigns to observe the canvassing of mail ballots only meant they were allowed to be in the room, in this case, the Pennsylvania Convention Center, the size of several football fields, and D, eliminating the statutory requirement that voters properly sign, address, and date mail ballots. The petition seeks all appropriate remedies, including vacating the appointment of electors committed to Joseph Biden and allowing the Pennsylvania General Assembly to select their replacement. The campaign also moves for expeditious consideration, asking the Supreme Court to order responses by December 23rd, a reply by December 24th, to allow the court to rule before Congress meets on January 6th to consider the votes of the Electoral College. Meanwhile, Trump, big news coming out of Pennsylvania. It may very well be exactly what we have just reviewed here, as he is challenging the election results. It's not clear if the president was referring to the appeal that I've just reviewed or a new development. Trump's campaign case is attempting to reverse 3 cases decided by the state Supreme Court that illegally changed the mail-in ballot laws immediately before and after the 2020 election. Big news coming out of Pennsylvania. Very big illegal ballot drop that cannot be accounted for a rigged election. And of course, Twitter claimed that reports this claim about election fraud is disputed, as though it weren't news and significant that the president made the claim, where it's not the role of Twitter or the media to decide whether what the president says is true or false. They don't have privileged access to the truth. They're playing the role of propaganda and censors. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Yeah, Jim, we really are seeing this this shadow government and the deep state really flexing their muscles, and we're seeing the covert power that they really have. And this is why every single effort that Trump has made so far to challenge this obvious fraud has been shot down and shut down without even really a fair look at the evidence. And I'm just shocked by this. But one good thing about this is that they are inadvertently showing us that we do not have a representative government. It's all just a facade. And I think more and more people are starting to see that. And I think the anger about this is only going to grow in the future, Jim.
Scorpio, I think you're spot on. I think you're exactly right. Michael, your thoughts?
I completely agree with what Scorpio just said too. We do not have a representative government. And it goes back to what I said earlier about there having done an end run around representative government. And it's now a corporate oligarchy, and they're all working the same agenda. It's going to boil down to one of two things. One, the Supreme Court, and it looks like Alito and two others are the only ones we can count on. I was really surprised to see Amy Coney Barrett vote against Trump in that Texas case. And the other one is the January 6th date, where Pence, I haven't gotten clear on just how much power he has at that point to either accept or reject the electors' votes. But it goes to a bottleneck right there. One thing that does not make me feel good about that is that he has scheduled a flight to Israel the next day from January the 6th.
Michael! Mike Pence is scheduled a flight to Israel the day after the election?
The day after January 6th.
He may be fearful of his own assassination if he betrays Trump. My God, that's shocking. Absolutely shocking.
It is. And can I add something, Jim?
Of course.
Wow, I did not know that, Michael. That is amazing, and it's very telling. And of course, Pence just took the jab on camera the other day to deceive the American public about, oh, hey, take the vaccine. We all got to take the vaccine. Don't question it. So you put those two things together. I don't think we can count on Pence to do much of anything. I hope I'm wrong, of course.
Yeah, he scheduled a 2-week trip to Israel, coming back just before the inauguration.
Wow. Very, very disturbing. To the max. Meanwhile, Barr just left Joe Biden speechless by doing him this big favor. Donald Trump was let down by Attorney General Barr once again. This time the betrayal came in public. Barr just left Biden speechless. In a press conference before Barr officially steps down as Attorney General, Barr told reporters he would not appoint a special counsel to continue investigation into Hunter Biden allegations of tax evasion, securities fraud, and money laundering. Attorney General William Barr says he's not seen a reason to appoint a special counsel to investigate Hunter Biden and has no plan to do so before he steps down. This is just disgusting beyond belief. It combines here with Biden having a 65% transition approval, very bizarre all by itself. Nearly 2/3 of Americans approve Biden's presidential transition approach. 65% approve his transition, 39% approve the job Donald Trump's doing, down 7% from before the election. 15% approve the job Congress is doing, the lowest of the 116th. 16% of Americans are currently satisfied with the direction of the country, making the second consecutive month that satisfaction has dropped. While a majority of Americans approve of how Biden is approaching the presidential transition, Republicans are critical. 96% of Democrats, 67% of independents say they back how the transition is being handled, but only 23% of Americans say the same. And of course, this is not even the real Joe Biden. This is a comedy, an actor who's secretly playing the role of Joe Biden. I want your comments on both of these developments before we move forward. Scorpio.
Well, I just want to add one thing to what Michael said. What in the world is the vice president of the United States doing in Israel for 2 weeks? That is absolutely outrageous. I mean, I can't believe it. Well, actually, I can, but it shouldn't be that way. And
it's while at a time a new government presumably is coming in as well.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks in a foreign country. Of course, we're not supposed to see Israel as a foreign country. It's supposed to be like an extension of the United States. But This is outrageous, and it shows you the kind of influence that Israel has over our country. It's amazing.
Well, he's making a getaway. He's getting out of Dodge before they can catch up with him and lynch him. I think it's a sign he's going to betray us. And the truth comes out. We're in a situation where we put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics. Words from the fake Joe Biden himself. Meanwhile, drug overdoses far exceed COVID-19 deaths in San Francisco. Talk about an exaggeration of a pandemic. The shocking numbers of overdose deaths come as COVID-19 pandemic has been the top public health story of 2020. That means the opioid crisis has taken a back seat. According to the AP, 621 people have died in San Francisco of drug overdoses so far this year, nearly 2 deaths a day. On the other hand, only 173 have died of COVID-19. Rather stunning. The eye-popping number is a significant increase over drug overdose casualties last year, when 441 died from drug overdoses. The number came a day after the Center for Disease Control reported 81,230 drug overdoses in the 12 months ending in May 2020, the largest for that length of time ever recorded. The pandemic has also intensified the epidemic by disrupting city services, forcing many people who often rely on others to help save them if they overdose to use alone. Chronicle reported first responders have used Narcan nearly 3,000 times, where Narcan reverses the effects of opiate and has saved countless lives. According to the CDC, overdose deaths from cocaine have also increased substantially. None of this, of course, comes as anything remotely in the order of a surprise. Get this. White lives don't matter. Every U.S. state is advised to prioritize non-whites over whites for COVID vaccinations. Half of U.S. states mention racial equity in their plans for a vaccine rollout. Of these, 12 states specifically mention efforts to reach diverse populations: California, Louisiana, New Mexico, North Carolina, Indiana. Among those who have listed equity as a key principle for vaccine distribution. New Jersey, California, and Kansas will focus on improving access to the vaccine by targeting transportation issues. New Mexico will focus on Native American communities. Many states will focus on their communication with Black communities who have shown an increased hesitation to take a vaccine. In the U.S., Black and Hispanic people are almost 3 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than whites. Every state has been advised to consider ethnic minorities as a critical and vulnerable group in their vaccine distribution plans. As a result, half the nation's states have outlined plans that now prioritize Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous residents over white people in one way or another as the vaccine rollout begins. New Jersey and California plan to prioritize minorities by working to remove barriers to accessibility. Gavin Newsom of California, experts are making sure Black and brown communities disproportionately are benefited. Latinos make up 60% of COVID cases in the state, even though they're 40% of the population. Cuomo echoed these thoughts in New York. We know that Black, brown, and poor communities have fewer healthcare institutions. Their communities too often have healthcare deserts. Your thoughts, Scorpio?
Well, Jim, this is outrageous. Essentially, this is a psychological ploy, a psychological tactic used to convince people that look how much the government cares. We want to help the most vulnerable people first. So this is just more mind games to try to trick people into taking this shot. And when you think about it, this push for racial quotas for every aspect of our lives, if you get rid of the emotion and boil it down, what it really represents is a power grab by the government, because the government is going to say, you have to hire this person, you have to hire that person, because we have racial quotas that we are enforcing. So it's more power for the government. That's really all it is when at the end of the day. And Jim, the article you had about the drug overdoses in San Francisco, I did not know that. It's shocking. and 3,000 Narcan uses recently. And really what that represents are people that would have died of a drug overdose if it hadn't been for the EMT getting there so quickly and saving these people. So the figures would have been even higher. And, you know, again, if you look at the big picture, what this really represents is the terrible toll that the COVID response by the government, not COVID, but the COVID response by the government, the terrible toll it is taking on society. And if you add that together with the increased suicide rate by over 30%, I mean, this is doing so much damage. It's hard to calculate, Jim.
Yeah, and it was all anticipated. We had all the sociologists and demographers predicting exactly what was going to happen. And of course, it's being fulfilled. So we're having more deaths as a consequence of the lockdown, social distancing, face mask wearing than would have ever occurred from COVID had been allowed to run its course. Michael, your thoughts?
Going back to Biden's famous statement about the putting together the biggest voter fraud organization in history, I keep going back and forth. I have a strong suspicion that that was actually written for him to say that way, and it comports with that principle that these Satanists who are running everything seem to go by, whereas they have to tell the people exactly what they're doing, like a vampire has to knock on the door and be invited in. Mm-hmm. The story about the drug overdoses being eclipsing COVID-19 deaths, that I have no doubt that that's been the case for a long time, because they've been calling everything COVID-19 deaths. There's a statement in the last thing that John Rappaport wrote that said the underlying fact that needs to be understood, what is called COVID-19 is not one condition. It's a variety of illnesses and effects stemming from different traditional causes that are then repackaged under the label COVID, which is exactly the same thing that they did in the AIDS epidemic.
You're 100% correct. In fact, even the World Health Organization has now acknowledged that a positive test for the PCR may only indicate that you've had a cold. Even the World Health Organization has now acknowledged that we've shut down the economy, locked it down, destroyed America because people have had colds. How bad is that? This is
and one other comment about that story about the whites being passed over for vaccinations for minorities. That is ironic to me, because on its surface, of course, it's just political correctness gone totally insane, but like, what's new? But it seems that what really gets accomplished is the exact opposite of what's on the surface, and that is these vaccines may have devastating effects on the people who get them first before we see what they do. So
that's a very astute. That's a very astute observation, Michael. Not only that, but it reaffirms the politics of identity the Democrats have been pushing, which is totally un-American, because now we're identifying people on the basis of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, not as human beings and as citizens of the United States entitled equal justice under the law. I think the whole Democratic Party has become totally undemocratic and anti-American, and it's a disgusting betrayal of the nation and its aspirations and ideals. Meanwhile, progressives looking for a reset after sky-high expectations are crashing down to earth. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party is looking for a reset after their sky-high expectations came crashing down to the ground. They're reportedly deeply disappointed with how this year has gone. Candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were dominated in the presidential competition by Biden after he came back from behind and clinched a Democratic nomination when the primaries and caucuses were being rigged. Progressives are like a superstar young athlete supposed to be coming into his prime, but still not establish himself as a starter, let alone an all-star. The reset progressives are looking for may not happen under a Biden presidency, which is harder to attack when their own side is in charge. Ilhan Omar, for example, and AOC have been frustrated with Biden's cabinet and presidential transition, respectively. Omar agreeing with Bernie Sanders that progressives don't have a big enough seat at the table. AOC noted the transition team was full of corporate bigwigs, including those from big tech and Wall Street, which she said was just horrible. Both members have been extremely frustrated. They're not, while they managed to defeat 3 Democrat incumbents in primaries and take their seats in the House, the progressive failed to unseat a single Republican in the congressional elections, a far cry from the 2018 midterms. In fact, as we've reported, the 27 most contested seats were each and every one won by Republicans. We had a better showing this past year than we've had in a long time, but it's still much worse than we might have hoped. Some of the blame was placed on the progressives spouting support for radical campaigns like defund the police and pushing for hardcore socialist policies. Erica Warner tweeted, Spanberger on the Democratic caucus call, we lost races we shouldn't have lost. Defund police almost cost me my race because of an attack act. Don't say socialism ever again. Need to get back to basics is yelling. Politico's Mark Caputo said a Miami Democrat told him the Democrats got obliterated by Hispanics in Florida, that their campaign to defund the police and support BLM likely killed their chances to take the state. But it was true all over the country. It wasn't just in Florida, but all over the country, which is why the claims that, Biden won an historic landslide are simply absurd on their face. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, Jim, as it turns out, the Groper Joe is so popular that he actually got more votes than there were registered voters. That's how enthusiastic people were for him.
Wow.
So, what can you say about that? And, Jim, what I'm seeing is, nobody is going to be happy with the actual reset that is planned. These progressives are essentially being used as useful idiots. Many of them are well-intentioned. They want to have a better world, but they're steering us into a situation where things are meant to get worse. And I think they're going to be in for a big surprise when they see the kind of totalitarian system that is actually in store for the world if people don't wake up and figure out what's going on. This whole notion of defunding the police, it's sort of a siren call to sail the ship of America straight into a rock and create chaos so they can unroll a type of martial law. And I believe that these globalist controllers, they have to declare martial law at some point, because when they unveil the new system, it is not going to be popular one bit.
Nice point, Scorpio. Michael, your thoughts?
The main premise behind that story was that progressives in the Democratic Party were dominated by Biden. What a ridiculous joke that is. I mean, they had at least 2 candidates that had a good chance of beating Trump in a fair election, and they had one that would have beaten him hands down, and that being Tulsi Gabbard. But she wasn't evidently part of the club. So in my mind, a deal was made somewhere just before the South Carolina primary happened. And it was made by people far above the political sphere to say, we're going to push Biden and Biden's going to be the new president. And we'll also tell him who to pick for vice president.
Right, who is just an abominable choice, who was the first Democratic candidate to fall out. She did not even make it to Iowa, Michael. How can they believe that people are going to support somebody like that, a political non-entity? Meanwhile, Gretchen Whitmer attacks Trump as she claims Biden won this election and he won it handily. We have the president wrapping up his campaign against election results, said the host of a MSNBC show interviewing Whitmer. They have conducted an audit of ballots specifically cast in Antrim County. They reaffirmed the 2020 election results. This is a county where a clerical error inspired some baseless conspiracies of fraud. How ridiculous. Let me get specific in this audit. The president picked up 12 votes, nothing anywhere close to the hundreds of thousands he claimed in his interview with Rudy Giuliani, 12. He got 11 on his own accord and one because it was a ballot that went to Biden that should not have. This is all ridiculous. All Whitmer needed to become unglued. I think these theories were put to rest before the audit. Hopeful this is one more data point for people to see Joe Biden won the election and he won it handily. He won Michigan by 140,000 votes. It's 14 times the size of Trump's victory just 4 years early, and they called it an overwhelming victory then. It was secure. The votes have been counted. Meanwhile, Trey Gowdy exposes the biggest problem Joe Biden has with this criminal investigation. Appearing on Fox News, former Congressman Gowdy ripped the fake news media for censoring stories about the criminal investigations into Hunter Biden. He explained a healthy press is one of three institutions that can hack to hold the powerful to account. But in this case, the fake news media acted as the arm of a political party, and American democracy cannot function if the press serves as a guard dog rather than a watchdog. There are three groups, Harris, I think provide oversight. You have the executive branch and ongoing criminal investigations. You have Congress, but you know the House is not going to do anything, and the Senate will only do something if they win one of the seats in Georgia. And then, of course, you have the media. Gowdy explained by not pressing Biden for answers about Hunter's business dealings, he was encountering two major problems. Look, I don't follow the news like you do, Harris, but I haven't seen that many questions posed to Joe Biden about his son. You know, what he said was he had nothing to do with his son's business. So the answer to whether or not that is true is relevant. If he's right, then someone is trafficking his name without his knowledge. If he's wrong, then he told us a lie, and his credibility is in the toilet. It's long been said the media will cover negative stories about Democrats with a pillow until the story dies out and stops moving. That appears to be a prime example. Meanwhile, the president will return to Georgia. In just a couple of weeks, Georgia residents will once again head to the polls. This time they're electing their next senators. Trump is heading to campaign for the Republicans. On Saturday, December 19th, said he planned to return to the Peach State on January 4th to rally for Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. His supporters must have a massive victory for them both. He's not the only Trump campaigning for the Republicans. Donald Jr. was there holding events with Perdue on Friday. The races next month will determine which party controls the Senate. If Biden wins the White House and Democrats win both Georgia seats, the left will be able to push through their radical agenda and change the face of America as we know it forever. Michael, Scorpio, your thoughts?
Gosh, Jim, these two Democrat candidates in Georgia, they're both very weak candidates. I don't remember the black guy's name, but he's a radical. He said all kinds of, he said all kinds of bizarre things in the past, and he has a shady background too. So I'll tell you, if these two candidates win, we will know that the coup is complete. And like you said, they plan on transforming America forever. And let's just pray this doesn't happen. But if it does, people need to understand that this is a coup to destroy America and that we are not living in a democracy. People need to give those illusions up if this actually happens. And you know, this Gretchen Whitmer character is a very dark. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I just laughed. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this Gretchen Whitmer character, she is dark. I mean, look at her eyes. She is just stone cold evil. Another one of these governors that's intentionally destroying their own state. She must have had some kind of deal cut with these globalist cabal behind the scenes to do what she's doing. It's outrageous. And I saw a clip today from the mainstream media where they actually let it slip that the investigation towards Hunter Biden has been going on for 2 years. So to me, that's just outrageous. If you have all the resources of the federal government at your disposal, and you're investigating Hunter's shady business dealings for 2 years, and you don't have anything to lock him up with already, you got to wonder what these people are doing all day. And that this isn't just a sort of one of these, yeah, we'll investigate, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. It seems to me that it's a phony investigation designed to go nowhere.
Yes, I agree completely. Michael, your thoughts?
I don't know if you guys know the really good commentator and journalist named Patrick Henningsen. He's an American living in England, and on the subject of he did a great show yesterday. His Sunday show is called The Sunday Wire, and Gretchen Whitmer, when she came up, he said that she really has some sort of Stepford wife vibe about her. And if you know that old sci-fi movie about the Stepford wives,
sure,
I think it was these housewives were all possessed by an alien presence of some kind. So
well,
that's just
they were really all just conditioned to be totally compliant and obedient with everything their husbands wanted. And
right, they were mind controlled.
Yeah, it was about a community where there was one woman who was resistant and independent, and they had to convert her too to make it complete.
Yeah,
it's not really sci-fi, although you could stretch it that way. It's more about mind control.
Mm-hmm.
I see. Okay, and I say good for Trey Gowdy to say those things, but there again, when he talks about what the functions of the government and these agencies and the press is supposed to be, it's just not that way anymore. All that to me is surface reality, and the real power is behind the scenes, and it's controlling these agencies and the press.
Well, here you got William Barr declaring in his last press conference he's not going to appoint a special prosecutor for Hunter Biden, than which there could hardly be a better case. I mean, it's outrageous, because you're going to, mean that the whole investigation will be under the thumb of his father, actually a fake guy, but a guy nominally his father, who obviously is going to allow it to proceed, but will kill it most expeditiously.
Yeah, and Jim, just the testimony of Tony Bobolino, I think that's his name, should be enough.
Bobolinsky.
Yeah, Bobolinsky should be enough to be investigated thoroughly. I mean, the claims that man made are just stunning.
Yep, you're 100% correct. And he did it on the highest rated television program in cable history, 7.8 million viewers, when he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. Meanwhile, Jeff Davidson, this is our 1776. If you fall for the ruse perpetrated by the leftist media machine, the DNC big tech, particularly Twitter, Google, Facebook, Hollywood, and the TV pundits, you'd believe nothing was wrong with the November 3rd election. If you only paid attention to these sources, you conclude anyone who voted for Donald Trump and believes there was massive fraud is borderline insane. Indeed, among the Democrats who believe massive electoral fraud occurred, they're looked upon by disgust with other Democrats who have consistently shown zero tolerance for anyone who strays from their pre-apparent narrative. But I remind you, after the Republican virtual convention, when C-SPAN was taking callers for Democrats and Republicans, everyone who called in on the Democrat line declared they were going to vote for Donald Trump. Don't fall for any of it. More than 1,000 witnesses made out sworn affidavits, admissible in the courts of law under the penalty of perjury. They could go to prison if they're lying. They are, however, not lying. In brilliant detail, they describe exactly what they saw. Some witnessed massive fraud that almost defies belief, but believe it. Nearly all of them show their faces on television and testify at open hearings, even though they're aware of how violent and vicious the left is and how swiftly they can act. Hundreds of thousands of ballots were manipulated, delivered late at night in uniform condition, no observers in place. That's merely the tip of the iceberg. We don't know how many fake IDs the Chinese supplied, but in one instance with witnesses and photos, a shipment of 20,000 fake U.S. IDs were stopped at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The left media machine worked overtime to discredit the findings at great pains, pointing out all kinds of alternative explanations. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, however, knows best. And that was merely one intercepted shipment. How many others of fake IDs made it through airport security? Moreover, we still don't know how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of ballots were printed by the Chinese and shipped here for nefarious reasons. We need to demonstrate in no uncertain terms that what transpired during the November 3rd election will not stand. We will not allow this facade to continue. We will keep making noise at a decibel level they previously not heard. We will back the president in countless ways. Let him know in no way will we allow him to be removed from the White House on January 20th. It cannot happen, and it will not happen. The cognitively impaired Joe Biden has no rightful claim to the presidency. Kamala Harris, who has never received a single vote, has no right to be vice president. Democrats have no right to assemble a cabinet, a White House staff, a team of counselors and advisors, and all else that goes with establishing an administration. The whole world is watching. Many are dreading what will happen to them if these almost innumerable acts of theft in the U.S. election are allowed to go unchallenged and unimpeded. Meanwhile, huge. Trump calls for all Americans to fight. Here's a very nice post from Debbie. We need every patriot to email and call your senators and congressmen regarding the fraudulent electoral college on January 6th. Below is an example of what to say. Please let your senators and congressmen hear your voices. My name is, I am calling to instruct my wishes for, to represent my voice in opposition to the fraudulent electoral college on January 6th. I'm demanding that my object to the slate of electors from the battleground states in support of Representative Mo Brooks. This will be my deciding issue at the next election, and I will not vote for you should you refuse to represent my wishes. Very, very nice. I recommend we do that. Meanwhile, let me take your thoughts before we move forward. Scorpio.
Well, Jim, so much of what we're facing right now essentially comes down to don't trust your lying eyes, trust the experts. That is the tactic they're using to mind control people. I mean, here we had Joe Biden, who really couldn't get enough people to fill up a chat room at his so-called rallies. I noticed that, the mainstream media very rarely showed the crowd at his rallies because it was embarrassing. And meanwhile, like Trump or not, the man had, 30, 40, 50,000 people at his rallies everywhere he went across the country. So again, don't trust your lying eyes. And, the 20,000 fake IDs from China, like the article pointed out, we don't even know how many made it through. That was just one shipment that happened to be seized. And of course, going back to this thing about the drug overdoses, many of these drug overdoses are coming from fentanyl, which is so powerful. It's a synthetic opioid, and all of that is coming from China, not Russia.
Nice points. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, that was a good article about the 20,000 fake IDs, and it's yet another example of what we've said before, that it doesn't matter what rock you overturn, you find vote rigging and fraud in this election. So it's just amazing. The article about Trump calling for all Americans to fight reminded me what today's mailing from Dr. Joseph Mercola says. And it says, a small step in the right direction you can take right now is to celebrate Christmas normally. Oh, that's not what I wanted. There are no guarantees. Oh, I know what it is. If we want to prevent the Great Reset from destroying life as we know it, we must view civil disobedience as a duty. We must resist it from every angle. We've got to communicate with our elected leaders and demand that they not infringe our constitutional rights and engage in political processes to help educate local sheriffs of their role.
Yeah, I think that's all correct. Meanwhile, we want to hear from you. Send fan mail, pro or con, to live-need-to-know@gmail.com. Live needtoknow@gmail.com. Here's some comments that are showing up on my blog. Will, tons of ways to prove whether a ballot of tabulation is authentic or not. Just look at the timestamp for the scanning of the late night Fulton County fraudulent ballot. But it takes a forensic audit, and that's what the courts have totally denied, except on a limited basis in Antrim County, Michigan, in a case filed on behalf of down ballot issues. No courts are going to back Trump. The judiciary is totally in the hands of the deep state cabal, as exemplified by the fact that not a single 9/11 lawsuit ever made it to trial. That was bottled up by Judge Hellerstein in New York City. Trump needs to leap into uncharted territory, seizing all voting machines and ballots in key counties around the nation and transferring them for safekeeping to a military base. He has already ruled out martial law, which his generals have indicated won't be used by them to confiscate electoral machinery. He could achieve the confiscation with federal marshals, but such a move requires a national intelligence assessment, still not provided, logistics, and a sufficient quantity of marshals to succeed. But where is he going to get them without the Department of Justice on his side? For all those who feel betrayed by Trump, I say he's done an amazing things, but he and the American people do not live in a democracy and cannot, without an actual revolution, succeed against the ruling cabal. Here's another. I've never known the intelligence community to say to a president or even to a deputy assistant secretary that we don't have sufficient information to answer your question. They would say we don't have complete information, but here's our report based on the information we have at this time. The 2018 executive order stipulates the information provided to the president doesn't have to come from an official office of the Director of National Intelligence Report, and that the heads of agencies or any other appropriate official can submit their information to the president at any time. That is crucial. The intelligence community has been compromised. As with the Dems, they answer to those behind the New World Order and the reset. They run the government and resent the fact that Trump thinks he does. And as the monster Schumer has said, they have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at him. Trump has alternatives. Will he use them or wait? Another great article, and whoever wrote it, yes, it's clear we're backed into a corner. Fight or die. A couple of million patriotic Americans in Washington will help. Also, for all patriots do a maypole dance around, I would say besiege, but that might sound like tacitly advocating a violent overthrow of the American government, which is publishable by law. Remember that, patriots. Their state capitol buildings. Nonviolent resistance of 70 plus million people will work, while violent resistance will be met by and possibly lose to even greater violence. The adversary will probably be staging false violent confrontations between their own forces just to scare the sheep. Avoid that at all costs. It only plays into their hands. Ultimately, truth is our most powerful weapon. So spread it everywhere you can. Focus on fellow patriots you can help who will help you. Arguing with knuckleheads, the sheep, and would-be sheepdogs for too long generally tends to be a time waster and a burnout. Best to join with high-minded, like-minded patriots and work together for positive ends. We can do it. We're Americans. Meanwhile, it's not coincidental that all corporate media are all in to demand fear that Democrats need to achieve their objectives. There's an alignment of big government institutions and multinationals to support the same. Nothing is coincidental. Everything is political. It's not about the virus. It's all about control. Meanwhile, remember Deagle's prediction of a drop in the U.S. population for 326,620,000 in 2020 to less than 100 million. 99,553,100 in 2025. Very serious stuff. Meanwhile, check out Volkswagen Conspiracy 2020. Remember, the secret of freedom lies in educating people. The secret of tyranny and keeping them ignorant. Check it out at Volkswagenconspiracies2020.com. The archives are available now. Meanwhile, final thoughts. Scorpio.
Well, the statement that Michael read from Dr. Mercola was awesome, and what really stuck in my mind is that civil disobedience is a duty. That's exactly right, and that's something we all need to remember, because if we keep complying and accepting the reality that these globalist oligarchs are trying to create for humanity, we are headed for our own destruction, and we're walking right into the slaughterhouse willingly. That's what we all need to see. And the only problem I have with this thing about examining the voting machines, I think it's been too long. It's a day late and a dollar short, because they've had plenty of time to go through these machines and scrub everything and change the data or whatever they need to do. And if you think about it, shouldn't have that been done immediately after there was some question about the election? Shouldn't all of those machines all over the country been seized immediately and gone through with a fine-tooth comb by independent investigators and possibly people from both sides of the aisle? And I'm just amazed that we just accept all of these things in our society without question, and that has to come to an end. And lastly, this idea that people are going to take to the streets, I think it's a great idea. There needs to be mass protests, and what the media always does is smear the people as far right protesters. And just incidentally, in Oregon, they've closed off the state legislature to the public completely under the guise of COVID, while they are doing passing very restrictive laws and regulations against the people. And some people actually tried to break into the state legislature while they were in session doing their dirty deeds. And of course, they were smeared as far right protesters and they were arrested. But the time to keep complying and accepting what these people tell us is coming to an end, Jim. We cannot keep accepting this reality they're creating for us.
Michael, your final thoughts.
Yes, we cannot continue to accept it. Several of the comments that you read of people who wrote to the program were essentially affirming what I said program about the court oligarchy having done an end run around representative government at every turn. And so for a final word, I would reiterate, if we want to prevent the Great Reset from destroying life as we know it, we must view civil disobedience as a duty. We've got to reclaim our sovereignty. And there are no guarantees in this life, and for many, this will be their last Christmas. So spend it well. Cherish life by actually living it and spending it with those you love. Refusing to give up our humanity is how we resist the Great Reset.
This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, thanking David Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador and Michael Ivey from Asheville, North Carolina, for their penetrating and cogent comments. The president being betrayed on every single side, the general's voter system and seizing the voting machines. Even the vice president appears is going to betray him at the count and make a getaway to Israel. The attorney general turns out to be a deep state rat. Call your congressman, call your senator, put pressure on them, express your opposition. Meanwhile, nonviolent resistance is appropriate, but it may be the case that we as Americans have to take up arms against a tyrannical government, not the leader thereof, who in fact is exemplary and a great American, but the traitors who surround him. And should that day come, you must be prepared. Stock up on supplies, pick up firearms, learn how to use them if you don't know already. You're not going to be able to count on the police. If you cannot defend yourself, no one's going to be able to defend you for you. You've got to do it yourself. I'm greatly heartened that the executive order of 2018 does not require specifically the report from the Director of National Intelligence. Sidney Powell has been there offering the president her advice. She and Lynn Wood are great Americans doing everything they can to preserve our nation intact. This is not over. But if it come down to it, it may be the responsibility of ordinary Americans like you and me and Scorpio and Michael to save the nation for the future and our posterity. Ponder this, enjoy the holidays, but be prepared. Brace yourself. It may be a rough ride. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with everything you need to know.